Hello and welcome to today's Augustana Human Library session. The title of today's human book is United as Never, and this is the human book's abstract. When I left home 3 years ago, I never thought there would be a day when I would have to wonder if I can return, and when I do, if it will ever look the same. I have never felt this close yet that far away from my home country, Ukraine. I am no longer paying attention to dates, rather counting the days of war as I watch the violent invasion and its effects unfold in my home. Thank you for being here today, and welcome, United as Never.
And thank you everyone for being here this afternoon. It's really a big honor to be able to share the story. And I don't know how much you've been following the news, but the invasion in Ukraine has been going on for over a year now. It started on 24th of February, so we're hitting 1 year and 1 month mark pretty much. And I'm originally from Ukraine. I came to Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where I am currently. About 5 years ago, as a high school exchange student, I had a host family. I really liked the place, so I decided that I want to stay. For to do that, I needed to go home, graduate from my high school, and then come back for college. And that's what I did. I went and spent 2 months in Ukraine, and then I came back and started my studying at Nebraska Wesleyan University. That's where I am now in my senior year. And I have not been home since the beginning of college. There were plans, but then pandemic got in the way, then other things, and finally it was invasion that got in the way. So I haven't seen most of my family or been home for, in August it will be 4 years. So that's already tough. I'm an only child and I don't see my family, my grandparents. I have two cousins, and so they all really miss me. And another challenging part about this is that my grandparents are pretty old, so they're at the part where they get confused about things. So every time we talk, they would be asking me, when am I coming back, when I'm gonna return home, and they didn't quite understand that that is not the part of the plan. And then fast forward to kind of the beginning of February, before the invasion started. There are things on the news about some of the military equipment moving around, some of the weapons. There's suspicion from the US that something's been planned. And the situation between Russia and Ukraine has been tense for a while. So there's suspicion that something's going to start. Nobody knows when, nobody knows how, where, but there's suspicion. So I was on the phone with my mom and I said, "Well, what do you think?" And there's been conversations in media about a carry bag, so something you need to have something packed, so in case you want to leave, you just grab it and go. So a pair of clothes, then medication, and some food. It needs to be ready. And so I was like, well, do you have this bag packed? Are you going to? What are you thinking? And she continued telling me, no, it's okay. Nobody's worried about it. My friends don't think anything's gonna happen. My family didn't think anything's gonna happen. So it's okay. It's okay. They're just talking, 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 talking. And they have been talking until it came to be February 24th. And I remember as if it happened yesterday how I found out. I am the RA, we call them PAs here, peer assistant, residential assistant. So basically, I help students adjust to the dorms, and if they have any questions, I'm the resource there. And I was doing my rounds, walking around the building, checking things out, seeing what's going on, and just talking with my friends. Usual college evening, Wednesday, nothing out of the ordinary. And then I get a message from my mom, and it wasn't anything complicated. It simply said it started. And I look and say, "What started? What do you mean it started?" And she's like, "The war." and I immediately start checking the news. There's explosions all over the country. There's smoke, alarms going off, sirens. People don't know what to do. And they truly attacked on Thursday morning at 5:30, or between 5:30 and 6 a.m., when people were peacefully sleeping, not suspecting anything. There were hits and rockets flying all over the country. Their goal was to hit electricity stations, water stations, those kinds of places that are necessary for everyday regular things. So power went out in some places, water supplies, and so on. So on top of people being confused early in the morning, lost, scared, they also lost some of the necessities. And immediately the question was, well, what do I need to do? What do I do? What should I do? And fast forward, I'll tell you a little spoiler. My mom is here. My mom is just 5 minutes away from my campus, and I can see her anytime. And she's been here for almost a year now, which is a great blessing. It's fantastic. But her trip here was not an easy one. Basically, we didn't know what to do. And I remember sitting on the floor in my kitchen and just kind of thinking. I think about it now and wonder, why was I sitting on the kitchen floor? And I realized that that is the first place in my space in my room where I come in. It's the kitchen. And somehow I thought that if I sit down right there, I don't have to move and I don't have to waste any time that I need thinking or preparing for mom to come, to leave, and to travel. I felt such strong pressure of time that even moving to the couch or to my bed, to the desk, seemed like a waste of time. Thankfully, my host parents are amazing, supportive, wonderful people. And I talked to them, and I called them immediately and I said, so what do we do? What's your advice? And they said immediately needs to leave the country. She can come here, but before she can come here, she needs to get out. So that's kind of what we worked on. And she left the country. She had a car at that time, and lots and lots and lots and lots of people were leaving. And it's still February, so it is pretty cold, and was the year when the winter was long. So the gas stations are filled with cars because everybody's trying to get gas and leave. There's long lines in the stores because everybody understands that they are not going to be able to freely walk around and they need food. People were preparing shelters in the basement because back at home, we don't have houses as much as we have apartments. So people were hiding in the basements, bringing in some things to kind of equip it better. The famous train station in the capital, in Kiev, where people spent days and days and days because that was their safe place. So people were running around organizing that. And when I told mom she had to leave, well, even though deep inside she realized that it was the right thing to do, she didn't love the idea. And I don't blame her. I absolutely don't. She had so many things that she worked so hard for. And she had her new apartment, she had her car, she had her career, and she really just had to leave everything and launch into the unknown because even though the final goal was to get her here, we didn't know how long that's going to take. We didn't know really what the process was. We didn't have a plan for where she could be. Until then, we couldn't teleport and get her from there. So, really, she had a really difficult journey ahead of herself, pretty much all on her own. So, she gathered her belongings. And I think this is This is funny now, but it was really strange back then. She didn't know what to pack because she was in a complete panic mode. And out of all things she could have packed, she put her fur coats in the car. And for the longest time, I didn't understand why she did that. Because, I mean, they're nice, they're warm, they're pretty, but what are they gonna do to you? And she said, well, if I ran out of money completely and needed something, then worst case scenario, I would sell my coats, and hopefully that'll get me somewhere. And that's when I realized how much more complicated and scary the situation is. And it's only one of the examples of the things that I feel like I read about in the textbooks about the World War II. People selling their belongings to just get along, people running away from the country, people hiding in the basements, all those things, all those pictures that you see now, the invasion, are the same things I saw in textbooks. And so she left the country and she spent 13 hours on the border in the middle of winter all by herself just to cross one border and get out of the country. And for me, because we have 8 hours difference with Ukraine, it was night. And I'm not over exaggerating when I say it was the worst night, the hardest night of my life, because I couldn't help it but watch the news. That Watching news didn't help me. It didn't make me feel any better. In fact, it made me feel even more scared. It made it all feel a lot more real. But I felt like I needed something to kind of lean on, and the news is what it was for me. So I was watching the news, and the scariest things that I've seen. People trying to leave, holding up white flags, or soldiers thinking that they're not civilians but other soldiers, and lots of confusions that happened there. And I was really, really, really scared for my mom, because at least there are families traveling together or people traveling in groups. She was all on her own, so that made it even scarier for me. And she was standing on that border for 13 hours. She had no way of contacting me. And I was really scared because I had no way of reaching out to her. And I didn't know where she is, what's taking so long. Did she make it? Will she make it? And that was really, really scary. Well, finally, she made it to Moldova. And from there, she stayed there for a couple days, and we were on the phone with my host dad. We are trying to make a plan, see where she wants to go, how can we do that. And he said, well, if she's so scared, which undoubtedly she was, I will go there and I will get her. But before I can do that, she needs to get closer, because the closest he could meet her was in Hungary. So she had to drive cross two borders, because from Moldova she had to go to Romania and cross that border. Then from Romania she had to drive to Hungary and cross a border there. So two more borders to cross, and again many people are still leaving, so the lines are incredibly long. And Romania is a pretty cold country because it has mountains there. So she said, well, I have no choice. I can't stay here forever. And the place where she was staying was pretty much right on the border. And it wasn't really safe because it was unclear whether they're gonna start the invasion there as well and aggravate countries around Ukraine. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the entire situation. Then from there, mom gets in the car and drives all by herself to Romania. From Romania, she stayed there overnight at some sketchy Airbnb, but again, she didn't have many choices, so she was kind of doing what she could. From there, she drove in the mountains, and she almost, because there's a lots of looping around, she almost got in an accident where her car got completely turned. around because of the snow and the mountains. But everything was fine. Just another really difficult and scary moment. And she finally makes it to Hungary from there, where she met my host dad. And the most ironic part of it is that while everything was happening, I was in Disney World because it was my spring break and we had planned a vacation and I was going with my partner, and everybody thought that I can't really help, but I should go there and have some fun, maybe get distracted. And while it was a fun place to be, I felt incredibly guilty because my cousins are, and at the time were still in Ukraine, and my younger cousin was turning 4 years old that year. Her birthday is at the beginning of March, so just short 2 weeks of the start of the invasion. She had her birthday, and not only could they not go to Disney, they couldn't celebrate because they couldn't go outside the house and buy anything to even make a cake. They couldn't invite guests, and more than that, they couldn't even stay in their apartment for the birthday. They had to be in the basement hiding because the sirens were going off, the air raid, and they were in the basement. So there I was in Disney, most magical place on earth, and my cousin, my 4 year old cousin, is hiding in the basement for her birthday. And I still think about that a lot, trying to decide whether it was the right choice for me or not. And that's kind of something I'm battling with a lot, is that I think they call it survivor's guilt, which nobody from my family or really people I know have died during this invasion, thankfully. But to think that there are people hiding in their basements, or they're the soldiers and they're fighting, and I'm here peacefully sleeping in my bed. I don't have to think about any of that. I don't have to plan my groceries 3 weeks in advance because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have to be eating canned food. I don't need to be wearing 500 blankets and sitting in the basement. And I can go to lectures. I can do things on Zoom. I have stable internet. I don't have to worry about when my light is going to go out. And moreover, I don't have to worry if I'm gonna wake up tomorrow or not because I know I'm in a safe place. But at the time, that's what I did. And mom was traveling. They met in Hungary, and then they were headed to Austria and Germany. And that's where the one of the united pieces really comes in. I don't know many people in Europe, even though that's the part of the world I am from. I don't have friends in every country, and lots of people were leaving. So it's really hard to find housing. And it was more important to find not just housing, but a place where mom could get some help. So just getting a hotel or an Airbnb was not a solution. And I studied German at the university. So I talked to my professors, hoping that they're going to know some people in Germany. And they actually did. They sent out a large email to people that they knew. And we got connected with a woman who used to teach here at Nebraska Wesleyan University. And she was originally from Germany, and for some family related reasons she had to go back, but she said, your mom is about the same age as my children. We have a free room, and she should stay with us, and she can stay as long as she needs to. You don't need to give us anything for this. We're gonna get her the help and support that she needs. And that was wonderful. I cried a lot at the start of the invasion. I cried a lot for different reasons. And that time I cried with happy tears because knowing that a stranger will just let another stranger in and say, yes, please, and will love and take care of you, that is really, 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 really strong. And later I found out that she lived in Germany after the World War II. So she's familiar with the whole time of rebuilding, and she's seen war firsthand. So she had even more compassion in the situation and could relate to some of the things that mom has seen and gone through. So they stayed in Germany for 2 months until she was finally able to get her paperwork done and come here. And like I said, now she has her an apartment. She bought a car not that long ago, and she got a job. She got permission to work, and she is continuing her career as an accountant here. And we see each other every week, and that is a really positive part of the story that keeps me believing in the best. Now, I talk a lot about my mom. There's also my dad's side of the family, and my parents are divorced. That's why I talk about them as separate people. And my dad's in Ukraine. When you turn 18, you have to go through mandatory training in the army. So that's what he did back before I was born, and he trained to be a paratrooper. And that is not really helpful in the kind of strategy that we have right now. So he was staying at home, and I was texting him, asking him how things are going, does he think, what's his plan. And almost immediately they put in the law that men are not allowed to leave the country if you're 18 to I believe 70 or so years old. You can't leave the country because, well, if everybody left, who's going to be there defending? And 2 days after the invasion, my dad said, I'm going to go and volunteer and be the volunteer soldier because, well, if I don't do it, if other people don't do it, who's going to be there to do it? It really scared me because I know there are some families who have parents in the military and that's their life. And that's not to say that it's not scary to them, but that's kind of the life that they know and live. For me, my dad worked in the port. In summer, he was installing air conditioners and doing some scuba diving on the side. So, very low risk activities, all things considered. And that's the life that I knew. That's the dad that I knew. And all of a sudden, he's going to be in the armed forces of Ukraine. And he went and he volunteered, but there's so many volunteers that they didn't have enough weapons and other equipment and location set up for that many people. So they sent him home. And 2, 3 days later, they called him back with some questions and they had an assignment for him. So he became a part of their reconnaissance unit, and he was stationed on the border with Moldova. And now I talk about it more or less as if it's a normal thing because even though it is sad, people get used and adjust to the worst things imaginable. And I think in a way, I kind of got used to the fact that my dad is in the military. I'm not less scared about it. I'm not less worried for him, but I just kind of know that that's how things are. And at the beginning, things were a lot, I was very much out of balance. And a few examples are we used to test sirens because in Nebraska we have a lot of tornadoes. We used to test sirens every, I don't even remember, but let's say Tuesday at 12 p.m. And I come from classes and I was sitting on the same couch, and it was maybe a week after the invasion started, and I hear the sirens. Well, sirens are not a good sign back at home. Sirens are the sign that you need to hide. Here, the sirens also mean that you need to hide because there's a tornado, but the weather was very clear. So before I could realize that it was the testing, I was listening, and my immediate reaction, where do I hide? Where do I need to go? And am I'm in danger. It felt like I was in Ukraine and things were under attack and I needed a safe place. And it took me a while to realize that I'm in a different country and I'm actually safe. Or there were times when I was driving, and just like I said, a lot of people were trying to leave the country, so there are lots of cars. And traffic in Lincoln is usually very decent. Don't get stuck in traffic for a long time compared to other places in the States. And whenever there was a group of more than a couple cars and we were stopped at the stoplight, all of a sudden I had a feeling that, oh my gosh, we're trying to escape, we're running for our life. And I was just driving home from a retirement home. Actually, I visited a woman there, and I just felt like I was running for my life just because there are multiple cars around me. Or usually in Nebraska, you'd see cars with Nebraska license plates, logically. But there are some other plates, and whenever I saw a plate from a different state, all of a sudden I felt like they were the enemy, they were the invader, and they're going to do something bad for me just because I knew that there was an enemy, an outsider who was invading my home country. So for a while, I had hard time separating what was going on at home and what was going on with me here, because obviously I'm safe and things are nowhere near the same or as bad. I talked to my dad a couple days ago, and actually we talked today. We're able to keep a stable connection. We usually just send messages and photos to each other. He's not allowed to talk about where he is because he's in a reconnaissance unit, so they kind of investigate where the groups of enemies are and what are they planning. So they're trying to get to know their plans and locations more so than relate to other units. So his job is kind of secret, and it's not safe for him to tell me where he is just in case somebody else hears our conversation, because it is actually more common than I imagined. So I know general area where he's now, and he got relocated just last week. He is about 10 kilometers, which is about 7 miles away from the enemies. And they have to hide. They live in a more or less abandoned building, and they just equipped it to be there. They have enough food, but they're always on the watch. They take turns sleeping, and they equip lots of hiding places. So he has moved to a less, a more serious, less safe location than where he previously was. And it is kind of scary. He talks about it with humor. Um, but and he is very optimistic, because really that is the only way you'll be able to get through it if you are there right now. Unfortunately, there are lots of situations where he served with some people, there are units nearby, they got sent somewhere, and a lot of them did not return. The military vocabulary is 200 and 300. Those are the codes for people who either went MIA or they got so severely injured that they're pretty much in a coma. So those are 200 and 300 codes. And a lot of people he personally got to know were like that. But one of the things he said is they're located in some kind of village, so remote-ish area, and he said that all the villagers are bringing them food, and they are offended if the soldiers offer anything in the return, because they are very grateful for the soldiers for being there, defending them, keeping the enemy away, and they want to help as much as possible and show their support and their gratitude, which is what I think is very empowering. In times like this, lots of people came together and are there for each other to help. And you really think differently about the notion of love and relationship and your family. And my mindset really changed about quite a few things. I think the biggest feeling that I have in this time is feeling helpless. And that is very difficult on many levels because a consistent feeling of being helpless is very exhausting. Then it causes guilt. I want to help, I can't help, I don't know how to help. People are dying here, and I am in my bed watching TV, going to school, doing my normal life. And then the other part of it is it lives with you for a long time. It's a very unsettling feeling always in the back. But then I realized that the thing I can't donate a lot of money. I'm a college student, and even though we gathered some resources, it's never gonna be enough. There's always gonna be more needs, and I can't be spending my money only on that. I still need food, clothes, and paying for tuition. But what I learned I could do, and what made me feel less helpless, is talk about it. At the beginning, I was invited by some local news stations to talk about the story. And in part, that would help my mom when she got here. Lots of people knew about her and her story and welcomed her here. And in fact, we got a hold of the local government and they helped us with the application. So that was a positive aspect. And I was talking with one of my professors, and she said, "You might not feel like it, but you are doing a lot by sharing the news because you're putting a face to a story." And that kind of what encourages me to continue talking about this. Maybe I'm not able to donate all this money, I'm not able to be next to my dad in the front lines, but I'm able to talk about it. And the memory, the knowledge about all the heroic action, all that the whole nation's going through, and all of their action of kindness and being united, talking about that, putting faces to the stories, educating people and making sure that this is kind of not forgotten because it's been going on for a really long time is very important, which is why I think it is important to talk about this, and part of the reason why I'm very honored to be here and share my story. So I think that's what I had and wanted to talk about today. So I'll open it up for questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments you would like to offer or ask? Be quiet.
That's okay. It's a lot to process, I know.
How is your mom doing with learning English and such? I don't know, I think it was about a year ago that I was talking to you about her coming, and that was, of course, one of the
Hmm.
um, the hardest things to face was moving to a place where it's everything's unfamiliar, but to not know the language is especially scary.
Hmm. It was a journey. It was definitely a big journey. She is much better, much more confident now. She's working in the language in an American company here, a local software development company. She talks to friends, family. She has established some relationships, but there's still nothing like speaking in your native language. And she feels it. She talks about it. She speaks Russian to me, and that's interestingly enough, Russian and Ukrainian are rather similar languages, but they developed at the same time. So Ukrainian did not develop from Russian, Russian did not develop from Ukraine. They both developed from Latin language, Cyrillic alphabet, and they developed at the same time. But because a lot of people in Ukraine were born, or older generations were born and lived during Soviet Union when the language was heavily oppressed, not taught, and Ukraine as a country did not exist, they spoke Russian. My parents grew up speaking Russian. My grandparents grew up speaking Russian. And my generation is probably the first one to actually learn Ukrainian in school. So I can speak both, but my parents are better in Russian than Ukrainian. That's a big discussion, a big debate back at home right now, but there's nothing for her like speaking in her native language, saying the things that she means and how she means to say them and how she's used to them. I think she's translating in her head a lot less, which is helping her to speak more fluently and actually process conversations. But at the beginning, it was very difficult. She knew English because she was studying English actually with me because I used to work as an English teacher back in Ukraine, and so her friends and my mom were taking lessons from me. So she could have a conversation, but there's nothing like being in the environment and speaking that language 24/7. So she was very tired. She was very frustrated. She was nervous about going places, to the stores, to the parties, different events, because she knew that she would have to talk, and she was feeling like she wasn't good enough, and she was again nervous about that. But she's much better now, has made significant process progress. Thank
Are
you.
there other Ukrainian students at your university? Like, do you have any kind of local support from people who, are from there and understand it more, from a first-hand experience than, other people that you would just be going to school and such would?
Actually, there is a professor who is originally from Ukraine. So we connected at the beginning. We spoke at some events together, and his family, his parents were more, they were in a hotter spot in the country compared to where my family was. So we talked a lot at the beginning. There is a woman who came from Russia, from St. Petersburg, many years ago, but she can still speak Russian, and she is considering herself Russian. But when the invasion started, she sent me an email and said, "I'm so sorry for what is going on, and I would love to talk with you. If you need somebody, feel free to text me or email me. We can go out for coffee, whatever you need." And she had offered that support. Our university is pretty small, so there are not that many international students.
Mm.
We have UNL, a big state university here, and I'm sure there are more students like that, but I didn't know anybody. Of course, Ukrainian community has significantly grown here, and Lincoln is a refugee kind of place. Therefore, we have a lot of Afghan refugees, um, and there's communities and services built for them, but Ukrainians are developing their communities. So it is possible to meet other Ukrainians who have escaped or who have family and they came here on green card, or came a while ago for a job and have lived here for a while. But a lot of them share that even though they lived here for a long time, they still miss home. It's still sometimes hard to speak the language. And I don't think I needed that support as much as my mom did.
Do you still watch the news?
Honestly, a lot less. A lot less. If something becomes so mainstream that it um, shows up, I see it. Otherwise, I don't. I think there's a lot coming in, and it is very difficult to process. And as much as I care and want to care about everyone, I also have myself and my family to care about at the moment. So I figured if something were to happen, I would know. And watching the news and knowing that a house in our town was hit, or knowing that the rockets are flying over our house or over our town, does not help me, does not help my family, does not
Mm.
stop anything from happening. So I feel like nothing's going to change from the fact that I know what is going on, unless what happens is of big significance to me. And that I'm going to find out either way from other sources. So I just thought it's easier not to.
So if you were in a bigger city and you say you and your mom were speaking Russian, um, and Ukrainians heard you, like how do those two worlds outside of Ukraine and Russia live together?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. Even before the invasion started, sometimes when I said, "Oh, I'm Ukrainian," and somebody I have met some Russian people here, they would be like, "Oh, I'm Russian." Like they they almost thought like that was a ground for conflict immediately.
Mm.
They weren't confrontational towards me. However, they weren't excited about that fact. It was also like, ugh, oopsie. Um, and that always made me uncomfortable because I wasn't ever gonna come at somebody if they're Russian. Even now, if somebody said, "Hi, I'm from Russia," okay, that that doesn't change anything for me. If they were to say glory to Putin and everything he is doing is right and Ukrainians need to die or something along those lines, well, then of course I'd be a little more upset. But if they just say they're from Russia, it doesn't cause any anger response in me immediately. So that was that from the beginning. And my mom speaks Russian. She still does. And when we met people from Ukraine, they would speak Ukrainian. Mom would speak Russian. And she was like, "Hey, sorry, I'm just from this region," because it is a little bit regional in Ukraine. There were parts that always spoke Ukrainian only, but there are parts that spoke Russian and it is normal. And so she said, "I'm from this region. I don't speak Ukrainian very well." And they were very understanding about it. They were nice about it, said, "Don't worry, just speak whatever you can. We will understand you." And I think they had a lot of compassion because she's gone through a lot, and just letting her speak freely however she wanted to was the least they could do, and the kind of support that they provided. But if we were back in Ukraine and we spoke Russian, that would be a lot less acceptable. You are speaking the language of the enemy, you are supporting them. Plus, in a way, that is how they are able to tell who's Russian and who's Ukrainian. Because if you're Ukrainian, you are able to speak Ukrainian and Russian. However, if you are Russian, you're a lot less likely to be able to speak Ukrainian. So that is one of the things that they consider there. And I can also understand both sides because people who are in Ukraine now, they are exhausted. They don't get normal sleep, they don't get the proper nutrition. They have to always be on the go, alert. This is as much as they try to continue their normal lifestyle because they can't sit in the basement all the time for 2 years. Um, it is still not a normal life. So people are exhausted, people are aggravated, people are scared. So it is a lot easier for a conflict to happen. I also see a comment in the chat that say that the news we see on TV on both sides aren't being truthful. Well, there is a lot of propaganda. There is a lot of propaganda, and I think it depends on what you consider to be truthful, as in, are you truthful if you are telling everything, or are you being untruthful if you're selective about what you're talking about? Because Well, I trust Ukrainian sources more than I trust Russian sources. But at the same time, I know that there's not everything that they share. They don't talk about everything. And I know what my dad would be talking about and what I see on the news. And they don't talk about all the people that die on the Ukrainian side. They most importantly don't talk about Ukrainian soldiers who have died because they're not necessarily trying, or at least that's what I believe. They are not trying to hide that information, but they are trying to keep the morale going. And if you understand that half of the Ukrainian population died from the invasion, well, yes, it makes you angry, but it also makes you less hopeful and more scared, and they are trying to avoid that. Therefore they focus on, say, Russian deaths and Ukrainian victories more than they focus on Ukrainian losses. So that is one part of it. But also our days media is not always 100% truthful, and it's hard to be truthful in this time because you want to get news out as quickly as possible so people are aware of what is going on, but yet there's a lot of guidelines for what you can and can't share, how soon you can share it, because if there's a, say, a house that was hit in a specific region of Ukraine and we immediately talk about it and share the location, then the Russian army who send those rockets or whatever, those weapons, they're going to know where it
Mhm.
hit. So they're going to know how good their aim is, and they're going to be able to adjust and use it in their advantage, which we also don't want to do. So there's a very tough balance of what you can tell and what you cannot tell and should not be talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, people are being shown what they want to see. I think in some ways our media makes all Russian people evil, kind of growing that anger because not every single Russian wants this war. Some think it's fair, some think it's not, but we are shown clips that say things like when we talk to there's interviews of Russian people, and they say, "Do you support what Putin is doing?" And there are some people who are going to say, "Yes, 1,000% support. They deserve to die. They're doing evil things. They were going to attack and take over." They believe what they want to believe. So there are some people who are strong supporters. There's some people who say, peace in the entire world, and this is unfair. Nobody should die for power, like what is going on. So we are sometimes seeing more of that evil side compared to people who don't agree. So, yes, media has its own kind of game. Also, there's a lot of propaganda in Russia as well. So, for example, uh, from the beginning, Putin framed the invasion as he calls it a special operation because people of Russia in Ukrainian territories are being oppressed, attacked, and held against their will. So they are coming to Ukraine to free those Russian people who are being oppressed and held back against their will, which clearly isn't the case. And there's a lot of hard proof against that simply because sure, if that was the case, they can come and they can free, but then they'd be attacking people and places that are holding those Russians against their will. But in the process, a lot of people are dying, a lot of civilians, a lot of houses, hospitals are being damaged, attacked, and I highly doubt that children are the ones who are holding Russians hostage here, even if there are Russians that need to be freed and rescued. So, and from their perspective, we are being oppressed and we need to be freed when really nobody was being oppressed and didn't need to be freed.
You actually have any like friends in Russia that you're able to have contact with?
Well, I know this woman from the university, which we have met and we talked, and she still has her parents in Russia. My aunt has a sister who lives in Russia, I believe even in Moscow. So I didn't directly talk to her, and I don't know that I have much interest in it
Hmm.
just because it's already tough. I don't need to make it tougher kind of situation, but she has, and her sister does not agree with what is going on. And she said that if my family wanted to leave, they would help them in support in whichever way they can. So I think I yet have to personally meet a Russian who has negative or positive things to say about the invasion, but also not everybody is strong or brave enough to admit, yes, I support this, even if they think
Mm.
it's right. Because, I mean, they are going to be attacked because children are dying and civilians are dying. So it's kind of a tough point to prove that this is good and justified.
Yeah. Well, I would like to thank you for sharing your story with us today. I'm amazed by your strength and resilience, and the knowing that you have friends and family facing such incredible struggles, and I know you feel guilty with the distance and such, but maybe your distance is what's helping some of them able to be safe and see some hope in the future. So they're lucky to have that in you. And I remain very thankful that your mom was able to get to safety for you, and that she's um, feeling like every day gets a little better. It's just, I mean, it's heartbreaking to think of so many people in the world facing such immense challenges on a daily basis, and the people of Ukraine, right now are very much high on that list of people who are struggling with many unknowns and heartache and fear. And but I mean, hearing your personal story is much more impactful than as we've talked about here a little bit about the news. Like your professor said, I think it was your professor that you said, you and your family put a face to the story, and that's always true. Um, so your sharing your story makes an impact on all of us for sure. And I wish you and your family and friends all the best as you navigate uh, this horrible and difficult situation, and know that you're not alone.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Yeah.
like I said, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for listening. Knowing that there are people who want to listen, want to know, and care keeps me believing in good, and knowing that I'm not alone and that this is not just another conflict, another situation. It's not going to be forgotten. And there are lots of people who care and believe that it's maybe not right and things need to change.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, very much for joining us, and hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.